In the vast and lawless expanse of the American Old West, few figures loom as large in the public imagination as Johnny Ringo. As an infamous outlaw, sharpshooter, and gambler, Ringo lived a life of adventure and danger that captivated the minds of his contemporaries and continues to fascinate historians and enthusiasts to this day. Johnny Ringo was born on May 3, 1850, to Martin and Mary Peters Ringo in Washington, Indiana. He was the first child of a large family of 5 children and was related to both the infamous Younger and James brothers. When Johnny was 14, his family left for San Jose, California, but tragedy struck while crossing the country by wagon. His father was killed in a terrible accident. Despite the loss, the family persevered and continued their journey, staying for a year at the Younger's home before finally reaching San Jose. Unfortunately, Johnny's teenage years between 1864 and 1870 are not well documented, but there are rumors that he was a troublesome drunkard and juvenile delinquent who left his family and San Jose behind in 1869. However, there are conflicting reports about his whereabouts during that time. According to the San Jose Directory and Federal California Census from 1870, Johnny was working as a farmer in San Jose. Additionally, his sisters later claimed that he left San Jose as part of a harvesting team between 1870 and early 1871. According to some accounts, Johnny Ringo's delinquent behavior came later in life, when he was charged with discharging his firearm in a public square in Burnett, Texas. However, it was during the infamous Hoodoo War that Ringo's legend as an outlaw truly began to take shape. In September of 1875, Johnny Ringo found himself caught up in the Hoodoo War, a bloody feud that had erupted over cattle ownership between German settlers in Mason County and American-born residents of neighboring counties. Although Ringo's involvement was not over cattle, he was drawn into the conflict due to the tragic deaths of 2 close friends. Moses Baird and George Gladden, both of whom were Ringo's friends, had become embroiled in the violence. They were tricked by local gambler James Cheney into riding to Mason, only to be ambushed in an attack orchestrated by Mason County Sheriff John Clark. On September 25th, Johnny Ringo joined a group of 7 other men to seek vengeance for the death of his close friend Moses Baird. When the group arrived in Mason, Ringo and another man named Bill Williams broke away from the party and headed straight for James Cheney's home. Without warning, they shot and killed Cheney, the local gambler who had tricked Baird and Gladden into riding to Mason, setting off a chain of events that would culminate in the Hoodoo War. After the shooting, Ringo and Williams rode to the home of another accomplice in the ambush, a man named Dave Duell. When they called for Duell to come outside, he answered with a gun in hand, which frightened Ringo and Williams away. The 2 men then rejoined their party and boasted about the killing over breakfast. According to a report by a Texas Ranger, one of them allegedly stated that they had made beef of Cheney and that if someone did not bury him, he would start to stink. After avenging the death of his friends, Ringo and his party continued on a killing spree, taking down 3 more men. But despite their actions, no arrest warrants were issued against Ringo for the murder of Cheney. However, in December of that year, Ringo was arrested twice for other charges. The first arrest was for disturbing the peace in Burnett when he recklessly fired his pistol, although he was released after posting a $150 bond. But Ringo's second arrest was far more serious. He and former Texas Ranger Scott Cooley were thrown into jail for threatening to kill the Burnett County Sheriff and his deputy. The authorities, fearing a prison break attempt, had them transferred to a more secure facility in Austin. Johnny Ringo's troubles with the law were far from over. As Johnny Ringo and former Texas Ranger Scott Cooley were being transferred to a prison in Austin, Ringo's name was mentioned in the Austin Statesman on January 4, 1876. The newspaper reported that Ringo is said to have taken an active part in the Mason County War. However, the paper had misspelled Ringo's name as Ringgold, which caused confusion over the outlaw's identity. Official records confirmed that his name was indeed John Ringo. The Hoodoo War had ended, but there were still more conflicts in Mason County for a few more years. Ringo and Cooley were moved back to Burnett before being granted their request to stand trial in La Paz County. They were both convicted and imprisoned for making threats against the law, but they appealed the sentence. Ringo and Cooley did not want to wait until 1877 to have their case heard, and their cohorts agreed. They broke their pair out of prison in May 1876. Unfortunately, Cooley died a month later. Johnny Ringo's infamy continued to grow, but he only evaded capture for a few months before being sent back to prison in Austin. However, his earlier appeal went through and the charges were reversed. But this was short-lived when he was charged with the murder for the killing of James Chaney. Despite the serious charge, Ringo managed to escape conviction since no witnesses were willing to testify against him. He was released in May 1878 and settled in Loyal Valley, Mason County, shortly after. By November of the same year, Ringo was offered a position as constable for Precinct No. 4 at Loyal Valley. In 1879 and 1880, Johnny Ringo was causing trouble everywhere he went. He even shot a man who wanted to drink beer instead of whiskey and held a poker game at gunpoint, pocketing the $500 held by the players. In 1881, he was taken to Tombstone, Arizona to stand trial for the poker game incident. But Ringo was more concerned about a rumor that he was involved in a recent stage robbery. He blamed the legendary lawman Wyatt Earp and his friend Doc Holliday for spreading the rumor. The situation quickly escalated, and the men started reaching for their sidearms. Just as the conflict was about to turn deadly, a constable intervened and grabbed Ringo from behind, defusing the situation. Despite the diffused conflict, Johnny Ringo became interested in the long-standing feud between the Earps and the infamous Clanton Outlaws. While in jail in 1882, he learned that Earp and his posse were planning to arrest the Clantons in Charleston. Ringo organized for his bond to be quickly processed and, upon his release, set off for Charleston to warn the Clantons. However, Earp's brother James caught wind of Ringo's plan and wrote an affidavit calling him an escaped prisoner. This prompted a second posse led by J.H. Jackson to pursue Ringo, but they were intercepted by Ike Clanton, who informed Ringo of the warrant for his arrest. Ringo then returned to Tombstone where he stood trial, but witnesses once again refused to testify, and he was released. Meanwhile, tensions in Tombstone continued to escalate. Morgan Earp was killed by an unknown assailant in March 1882, and Ringo was suspected of being involved, though records from the time dispute this. Despite rumors circulating about Ringo's involvement in the feud, he was cleared of any wrongdoing by testimony in the Tombstone epitaph. However, the situation in Tombstone grew increasingly tense as Earp and his posse were accused of killing outlaw Frank Stillwell and were forced to flee the town. The following day, Sheriff John Behan formed a posse that included Ringo to capture the Earp posse. In one incident, Earp and his party killed a man named Florentino Cruz, who some believed was Indian Charlie, one of the killers responsible for Morgan Earp's death. At the same time, Earp was reported to have shot dead the most notorious outlaw in the area, Curly Bill Brocious, in the Whetstone Mountains. However, Brocious' death overshadowed Earp's killing of Stillwell and Cruz. Despite being exonerated from all indictments, Earp and his men fled Arizona in April 1882. Johnny Ringo, another notorious outlaw, also left Tombstone a month later. But just 2 months after his exoneration, Johnny Ringo was found dead. There is much speculation surrounding the July 13, 1882 death of Johnny Ringo. Some believe he committed suicide, as the facts seem to support it. However, others point to inconsistencies in the way his body was found that suggest foul play may have been involved. The last time he was seen was around July 11th, which was roughly when he left Gallyville. 3 days later, he was discovered with his back to a tree holding a .45 caliber Colt in his right hand, apparently dead from a self-inflicted wound. Although the evidence seemed pretty straightforward, some people, both at the time and in the years since, have examined it and believe that Johnny Ringo was actually murdered. Speculation centers on a number of factors, including the number of cartridges found in his gun, the possible lack of powder burns on his hands, the position of his hat on his head, and admissions from his contemporaries, including Wyatt Earp, to his murder. Burroughs, in his 1987 biography, John Ringo, the Gunfighter Who Never Was, and Johnson, in his book, John Ringo, King of the Cowboys, point out that while there are inconsistencies in the way Ringo's body was found, there is no conclusive evidence of murder. They suggest that Ringo's depressed state and heavy drinking in the days leading up to his death support the theory of suicide. Despite the continued speculation and debate surrounding his death, it seems likely that Johnny Ringo's story came to an end with his own hand. Goodbye, Johnny Ringo.